The Peter Schiff Show.
I also wanted to talk a little bit on this podcast just about some more business, problems of running a business, because I did get some feedback when I spoke on the podcast about the discrimination type lawsuits and the risks inherent in hiring members of minorities, including women who are obviously not minorities. They're a slight majority of the population. Although I think, when a lot of the civil rights legislation was being written or expanded to include women, of course, not as many women were in the workforce as there are today because they didn't have to work because their husbands could afford to support them. But now that we're so much of a poorer country with a lot higher taxes and lower living standards, women are probably as likely to work nowadays as men. And so they're not really minorities in that sense, but they do have all this protection when it comes to the ability to sue. Because when employers empower certain groups with these special privileges that they call rights, right, they really give them a club with which they can beat up their employers. And so some employers are reluctant to hire people who have that club because they don't want to get bashed with it. And now there were people that were saying, Peter, you're racist, just assuming that, a minority is more likely to sue. That's a racist comment. It's not racist. They're not suing because they're minorities. It's because they've been empowered with this club. If you don't have the minority, if you're not a minority, you don't carry that club around. So how are you going to swing it if you don't have it? If they didn't have all these laws and special treatments, then no, blacks or Latinos or gays or people in with handicaps or women would be no more likely to sue than anybody else. But they are more likely to sue now because of what the government has done. But yes, people will remind me that, men can sue for sexual discrimination. Somebody who's a man can sue and say, hey, you fired me because I'm a man, or you didn't promote me because I'm a man. But, it rarely happens. Even though there is that type of discrimination, it's very difficult to file that kind of a lawsuit. Juries are not going to be that sympathetic. It's, again, it's like a guy claiming he was raped. I guess it's possible for a woman to rape a man, but not that many jurors are going to buy it. It's going to be hard to convince somebody that happened. Just like, is it possible that somebody discriminated against somebody because they're male or because they're white? Yeah. But try selling that one to a jury. Try getting a lawyer that wants to take that case. People are much more likely to believe that the discrimination went the other way around. That's where all the evidence is, or that's the prejudice or the precedent. And so that's the road. So yes, it's much easier if you're black to say, I didn't get the job because I was black, right? Than to say, well, I didn't get it because I was white. I was talking to a guy who was, trying to get hired at my company. I was talking to him about where he worked in the past and, where he was working now. And he told me that, he had this particular job as a broker, but he initially wanted to be a branch manager. And it's a big bank. It's a, national bank. He wanted to be a branch manager. And a friend of him had gotten him the interview. And he interviewed and he was qualified, but then he found out from his friend that they couldn't hire him because they needed a woman to fill that slot. And so he took a different job, not the one he really wanted. And it was a high-paying job. It was a $200,000 plus salary job. But it took them another 6 years, and they eventually hired a woman. And it took them a long time to find the woman that they wanted. But they had decided that they needed a woman, I guess, because that's what they needed. They had too many men. They needed diversity, and so they were looking for a woman. But this guy tried to file a lawsuit. Hey, I was denied the job because I'm a man. Good luck, right? But and this is what happens with bigger companies. See, bigger companies, if you're a big company, you got to hire a lot of minorities. Otherwise, you look like you're discriminating, because part of the way they try to prove you're discriminating is they base it on the numbers. So if you hardly have any of a particular ethnic group, well, then that's proof that you're discriminating against that ethnic group. So large companies will actually go out of their way to try to find women or minorities to fill key positions, so they don't look like they're discriminating. But of course, to do that, they have to discriminate. Now, again, I think that's their right. I think if a company wants to hire a woman for a particular job, That should be their right. But of course, the reason they're doing it is wrong is because they don't want to get sued for not hiring women. So they're going out of their way to try to find them. Even if they have a qualified man, they'll spend 6 months looking for a woman. But for a small company, right, if you're a small employer and you're only going to hire, a few people, 2, 3, 4 people, then it doesn't matter. I mean, if they're all white or all men, no one can say that you're discriminating because your only 3 employees are white. It's not a big enough sample. It's not a big enough pool. So I think smaller employers try to avoid hiring anybody who is likely to sue them. And the larger employers, they have a different deal that they're working with. But again, people said, "Oh, Pete, you're racist," because it's not just minorities that will sue. And again, that's true. It's not about racism. It's about probabilities. But yes, you can be sued by white men. I know that because I'm being sued by one now. In fact, today, several of my key people, some management people and some people who work for me, are in New York because I have been sued by an ex-employee. Right? And this employee happens to be a white man, and he's suing me for wrongful termination. So it's not just minorities or women that can sue you, which is why hiring anybody is risky in America. It's just riskier to hire certain people because they're more probable, or there's a higher probability that they're going to sue you. But whenever you hire anybody, you make yourself a target, which is why, you should try not to hire anybody if you can get away with it. If you can start a small business and just outsource or automate, so much the better, because the government really makes it hard. Now, I might as well say a little bit about this case. I mean, "Oh, Peter, this guy is suing you for wrongful termination." What did you do wrong? Nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. It's a frivolous suit. That's the point. I hired this guy to do a particular job, and he wasn't very good at the job that we hired him to perform. In fact, I think he embellished, and that's, putting it nicely, his resume somewhat as to what he was proficient at, what his skills were. So he wasn't particularly good at what we hired him to do. But rather than firing him, we thought he might work better in a different position. So we kind of changed his job nature and had him do something else. And not necessarily at a lower rate of pay. We just had him do another function that we needed. Rather than firing him and hiring somebody else, we moved him to a different position. But the guy, just had a hard time getting along with other people. We had many, many complaints about this individual from other people in the firm, numerous complaints. And he was making the work environment difficult for other people, which of course holds me open to lawsuits from other employees. I mean, if you got one employee who's creating a lot of problems and making your other employees feel uncomfortable, if you don't remove that employee, you theoretically leave yourself open to a lawsuit from the other employees saying, "Hey, I'm subjected to harassment from this guy," or, he's making the work environment intolerant. So you always have to be very cognizant of an employee that you have that is, you're constantly getting complaints from other employees who are also in a position to sue you if you don't do something about the person that they're complaining about. And it wasn't just one person. It was numerous people throughout the firm that had complained about this guy. And, we had warned him several times and talked to him. But again, and you're talking about an at-will employee. I mean, we hire the guy, we should be able to fire him for whatever reason we want, just like he can quit for whatever reason he wants. But this is America, where you no longer have any rights if you open up a business and hire somebody. And so we ended up terminating him, which, and of course, having to terminate somebody is never an easy thing for a company. I mean, sometimes we terminate people because we need to cut costs because business is down. But when we terminated this individual, we needed somebody to replace him. I mean, so, you got to find a new guy. You need training. I mean, when you have an employee and you have some time invested in that employee, you don't want to have to replace them. I mean, as they learn their job, they become more valuable. But in this case, this guy was a liability. He was like a loose cannon, and making it harder for other people to work, and maybe subjecting me to lawsuits from other employees if I didn't, cut him out. Right? He was like a cancer in the body of the company. But and then of course, what does he just do? Well, he just files a suit and says, I want a bunch of money because you shouldn't have fired me. As if it isn't our decision in the first place who to hire and who to fire. He doesn't have an employment contract, right? He's working there at the pleasure of the company. And if the company decides that his services are no longer required, if there's no longer any value that he has to offer, my company is not required to continue to employ him. Now, of course, he has to fabricate all kinds of nonsense about why he thinks, his termination was unjust. But, what makes it easy for him to do that? He gets a contingency lawyer, so it costs him nothing to sue me. The law firm takes the case, and they hope they can shake me down. Now, in this case, it didn't work. I have a in-house attorney, so I didn't have to go out of my way and hire an attorney. But if I was a smaller business and I didn't have an attorney on salary, then I probably would have had to settle. But it's still going to cost me. If you add up all the costs of the time and I got employees, it's probably $5,000 to $10,000 worth of company resources that end up getting used up defending myself against a frivolous lawsuit for wrongful termination. But this is part of the problem that American business owners face. And this is why American businesses are so uncompetitive, why there's so many people that can't get jobs, is because the government has made it so hard and so expensive and so risky to hire Americans, all in the names of buying votes. And the reason is because when you're trying to get votes, there is a much larger percentage of people that want jobs than create jobs. And so you get votes by appealing to the job seekers, not the job creators. But when you punish the job creators in order to get the votes of the job seekers, then there's not as many jobs for the job seekers to get, right? And so the job seekers, it backfires, right? They want something from government because the government promises to make their lives better, yet the result is the government makes their life worse because they want jobs. The more jobs, the better. But now the government creates an environment that minimizes the number of employers because people want to hire fewer people or they don't want to hire people at all because of all these laws that politicians pass in an attempt to get the votes, right, of the people who wanted those jobs. And now the opportunities don't exist anymore. Again, you have to be careful of the government and government making promises. Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you, right? Those are the most dangerous words in the English language. Now, I want to point out, too, another example of regulation. I mentioned some time ago the reason that I opened up my offshore bank, Euro Pacific Bank, which is also a brokerage firm and investment advisory company. The impetus for my establishing that company was the regulators were just making it harder for me to work with foreigners who had accounts with my U.S. brokerage firm. It was just a higher level of scrutiny that was running up my compliance costs and really creating problems for my international clients who really resented the extra hoops that they were being required to jump through. So as a result, I set up this foreign bank to service my international clientele. And I thought, this is unfortunate because this is business that could have been done in the United States. It would have been more income for me in America. Maybe would have resulted in my employing more Americans. Instead, I now have upwards of 30 people working for my offshore bank, maybe closer to 40 now. A lot of these jobs would be in America, except now they're outside of America because regulation forced me to do something outside the country that I was already doing inside the country, and I could have expanded, but the regulations made it more difficult. Well, now it's not just that the U.S. government has made it more difficult for me to work with foreign clients, they've made it impossible. Based on the evolution, and maybe that's not the best word, but the expansion of regulations from the securities industry, we can no longer accept foreign accounts. Accounts from people who are domiciled outside the United States. And we're actually having to tell our clients who have foreign addresses that they need to close their accounts, that we can't accept any trades on their accounts anymore. And this includes American citizens. So if I have a customer who is an American and maybe he lives in Texas and he moves to Germany, He's got to take his account with him. I can't keep him as a client anymore because now he lives in Germany, which is ridiculous. But unfortunately, this is what it's come to based on the new regulatory environment we live in. So in order to work for my in order to be a client, a customer of my U.S. brokerage firm, you must live in the United States. Now, you don't have to be an American citizen. You could be a German living in Texas, but you have to live in the United States. If you live outside the United States, even if you are an American, you can't work with my U.S. brokerage firm. Now, the rules of my offshore bank, we will not accept accounts from anybody that lives in the United States. You have to live outside the United States in order to be a customer at my offshore bank. But you also have to not be an American citizen. So what that means is that American citizens who are living abroad can't do business with me anywhere. I mean, they can still buy precious metals from my gold company. That's not illegal yet. So Schiff Gold can sell gold to Americans who live in foreign countries. In fact, Schiff Gold could still sell gold to anybody, any place in the world. But if you're an American citizen living abroad, you can't be a client of my U.S. brokerage firm. That's against the law now. And you can't be a client of my foreign bank. And that's not because it's against the law. It's because my bank doesn't want to be compliant with all the U.S. rules and regulations that it would be forced to comply with if I did accept American citizens. But this is just going to make it that much more difficult for Americans to live abroad. Because if you move abroad and now your old brokerage firm says, you moved out of the country, I can't work with you anymore. Good luck finding a foreign brokerage firm that's going to take your account when you have a U.S. passport. So it's almost going to be impossible for Americans to live abroad and function in society. Having bank accounts, having brokerage accounts is going to be almost impossible unless you renounce your U.S. citizenship. Because once you do that, well, then, the albatross is off your neck. I mean, if you are an American and you do move to a foreign country, if you renounce your U.S. citizenship, you can't work with Euro Pacific Capital because of your foreign address. But once you get rid of that U.S. citizenship, we can welcome you with open arms at Euro Pacific Bank. But again, all these rules and regulations that make it so much harder to operate a business. Whether the U.S. government makes it difficult for people to do business with you, in which case foreigners, so the government is limiting my customers, limiting my ability to generate revenue. And then the government makes it easy for employees or former employees to sue me frivolously, running up my cost of doing business and making me reluctant to hire people. And of course, it's not just me. I'm just, using my personal examples here, just some things that are happening recently. But every businessman in the country is having to put up with various degrees of government interference, government regulation, all of which undermines his ability to run a business in the first place, start a business, grow a business, and most particularly, hire people. Hello, this is Peter Schiff. I bet you didn't know that without silver, you wouldn't be hearing this podcast right now or be able to use a computer at all. From laptops to smartphones to TVs to speakers, virtually all modern electronics use silver to conduct electricity. Did you know that the average solar panel uses 2/3 of an ounce of silver to function? And the solar industry is expanding dramatically, not just in America, but in booming developing nations like China and India. Silver is naturally antibacterial and is used extensively in modern medicine. Silver coatings are being added to breathing tubes, bandages, catheters, and other medical instruments to reduce the spread of infections. When antibiotics fail, silver still works. I believe the 21st century will be the century of silver. As fiat currencies continue to collapse and new uses are found for silver every day, the white metal's strong industrial demand and low per ounce price will make it increasingly attractive to savers around the world. At today's prices, people of any age and background can afford to buy some silver. Learn why silver is a smart and reliable investment in my free special report, The Powerful Case for Silver. Visit schiffsilver.com and download it now. The powerful case for silver includes information about silver's amazing chemical properties. It also explains why I believe silver may outperform gold in the coming years. Download the powerful case for silver and educate yourself, your friends, and your family about the white metal. Just visit schiffsilver.com to download my free report. That's schiffsilver.com.